So, Gillian, for the people that don't know you, your business, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, who you are, what you're up to right now.
Sure, yeah. So I am the co-founder of Humboldt Apothecary, and Humboldt Apothecary is a women-owned health and wellness cannabis business that was established in 2015. And so we've been operating, manufacturing products for the California cannabis industry for, I guess, 6 years now, which is kind of blowing my mind. And
Wow.
we make tinctures and topicals and provide kind of like a variety of educational materials to teach people about the benefits of using cannabis for health and wellness.
Got you. Great. So, health and wellness, focusing your cannabis brand that way. Tell me, like, when did the business start? How long have you been doing this? I read on the website 25 years of, health and wellness and being into that kind of industry. Tell me a little bit about how this all started.
Yeah, so my business partner, Susan Cleverton, and myself, we're both passionate herbalists, actually. So, we study plant medicine,
Mm.
and we've been studying that for a long time with a number of different herbalists and specialists in the field. And so, it's a passion of ours. And so, we approach cannabis from that perspective that it is another medicinal herb, essentially, of many that exist. And we've also taken quite a bit of time to study kind of like the eclectic uses of cannabis in pharmaceutical indications, like by doctors around the world. And something that's really been interesting to us is that cannabis is frequently, almost always, in fact, like in a compounded formula with other herbs.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that just much like the entourage effect, I'm sure many of your users are familiar with that concept that you have within the cannabis plant this suite of different cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids, and they all work together to create really like the therapeutic benefits of cannabis. It's not just the THC or just the CBD.
Mhm.
So, you can apply that concept at a larger scale where different plants, when combined together, have a very synergistic effect. And that's actually well documented in scientific literature. So anyway, cannabis was almost always combined with other medicinal herbs historically. And we've been surprised to see it's not treated that way so much in kind of like the modern application.
Mhm.
But we're sort of like looking to bring that back because we think that it has real therapeutic efficacy, and that people find when they combine other herbs with cannabis that actually works in a really different way sometimes in their bodies.
Got you. So that kind of leads us to the product side here, craft tinctures, topicals. What's
Mhm.
the process in developing such a very, I would say, pretty powerful stuff? This is not just something you get from a gas station. This is very thoughtful, scientific based formulas you're developing here. So when you talk about a new product or developing your previous products, what's the thought process behind that? Do you look at a specific illness, a symptom of the illness? What is that like to develop a product?
Yeah, so I mean, we're not necessarily looking at one specific illness, but we're looking at sort of like patterns and
Mm.
wellness. And when you're using herbs in general, you're sort of like it's preventative medicine, right? I mean, if you're super super sick, chances are you probably need to go to the doctor and maybe be treated with some kind of like an antibiotic, or maybe there's a bigger treatment. But if you can kind of like nip those situations in the bud ahead of time so that they don't turn into like a full-blown disease,
Yeah.
then you're sort of like creating vibrant health and resilience in your body, so that it doesn't ever get to that point. And so from the perspective of wellness, we create products for sort of like an umbrella of different sort of syndromes that you might encounter, like for instance, sort of stress and anxiety, that
Mm.
can manifest in a variety of different disease patterns, but you can also mitigate the stress and anxiety early on with herbs. And that's really where they shine and work well. And so when we create our formulas, we choose herbs that are going to be very safe and have very few contraindications,
Mm.
because we know we're not seeing every one of our customers, and we're not, treating them as an individual patient.
Mhm.
We know that these products are widely available on the shelves. And, what we do recommend that if you're taking any other medications, that you should consult your doctor before taking our products. Most people probably don't do that. So we seek to find really safe and effective herbs that are widely tolerated by the majority of individuals to go into these formulas. And there many of them, it's not like with pharmaceuticals where they've run repeated like scientific trials. As you probably know, most herbs don't have that kind of pharmaceutical companies don't want to put the money into doing those kinds of studies because they can't patent it. It's
Yeah.
a plant, you know.
Yeah.
But what we do have is anecdotal data, you know, from people using these plants medicinally for centuries. And so, you know, we know, you know, via that channel that they're largely very tolerated and quite safe.
Yeah, the upside seems a lot more, a lot better than the downside from some of these things. You said preventative type of care that can really push issues like, illnesses and chronic illnesses out either further in time or stop them wholeheartedly then.
Yeah, or even just help to mitigate them so that they don't become like a full-blown crisis, but more of a pattern in your health that you are aware of and that you can manage for. You know, that's kind of the ideal situation.
Gotcha. So I saw one of the products is, around sleep. When was the flagship product for you guys, or one of the first formulas you guys looked into? Because I'm guessing, there's a bunch of different patterns. Let's look into the most popular ones, or the ones that maybe affected people in your life or your personal. Were you one of your first customers, I'm guessing?
Yes, we definitely were. You know, we did a lot of like R&D on ourselves and all of our friends and family before we ever put these products on the shelves. And I would say, yeah, you nailed it on the head. Deep sleep, that's our most popular product. And it works really well. And people will often say, this product works better than other sleep products. Why is that? And I always tell them, it's the other herbs in there as well that makes a really big difference. They all work together synergistically to kind of create this amplified effect, which is to help you support restful sleep, which is so important because, I mean, we are all stress puppies in this modern era. Everybody is like
Yes. Oh yeah.
running themselves, and, it's this frenetic pace of life. And it's just, you go to turn off after you've been on and running like that all day, and most people can't do it. And so deep sleep is our most popular formula because it works really well. It gives people a restful sleep without having, kind of the undesirable side effects of other like pharmaceutical medications for sleep.
Makes sense. That makes total sense. And so I was looking through the website, your website here, and I saw on your Instagram, you guys link out to a recipes page. And I thought that to
Mhm.
be very, very cool. It probably seems like, a better idea to make a cool drink to put your tincture in instead of just plopping it in your mouth here. So tell me, what was the genesis for that? Any amazing recipes that people should look up and things of that nature?
Yes, we have amazing recipes. And so okay, so we actually have a really unique product line, which is a line of true tincture. So the definition of a tincture is really like an alcohol extract of
Mhm.
different plants. It's been really it's become a bastardized term where people call cannabis in oils tinctures, and we call our own tinctures too because people don't really know the difference in cannabis.
Mhm.
It's surprisingly like a very different industry than health and wellness, which I've been surprised about, but it's just a fact. And so we actually have the only line of alcohol-based cannabis tinctures in California. And, we do that because we're herbalists and we know the benefits. And one of the benefits of, excuse me, let me turn off my ringer. I just realized that was on. One of the great benefits of using an alcohol base is that you actually like partially bypass the digestive system. And so you start absorbing the cannabis into your bloodstream really rapidly. So it works much faster than an oil-based tincture. The downside is that sometimes people are a little surprised by the flavor.
Yeah.
I would say if you're an herbalist and you love like different botanical flavors, or if you're like a mixologist and you love like the botanical nuances that go into like a modern mixology drink, then you really get a kick out of these tinctures. But for your average person that is used to just taking like the cannabis and the coconut MCT oil, when they put this in their mouth, they're like, whoa, that's
Oh,
strong.
yeah.
And I always tell people it's like this is not like it's not a chocolate bar. You're not going to taste this for like the pure joy of the flavor. You're going to take it because it works really well. But I think that in California at this point, like the whole adult use market is a lot more focused around kind of like the social use of cannabis, recreational use, how to enjoy this kind of a product. And so because tinctures are a little foreign to people and they don't necessarily totally connect with that form of consumption, we've kind of sought to create something that's more creative and fun for people
Mhm.
to do together. And it's also an alternative to alcohol, along with the whole stressful life and, 2020 being just like a real beast when it comes to a lot of stress
Yeah.
for everyone. I think, we all kind of started leaning on our bad habits to kind of as a coping mechanism. And, I know frankly for myself, like I'm tired of my bad habits at this point. Like we've been doing this for months. And, at some point I decided to make the switch, like on a daily basis for maintenance to, having mocktails in the evenings to
Yeah.
manage my stress versus like alcohol. Cause I feel better the next day mostly, And so, yeah, basically like we create these fun drink recipes for people to, drinking is something that is very relatable. We all do it. It's a big part of our culture. And so like replacing the shots with cannabis instead is a really fun, creative, enjoyable way to, consume cannabis with your friends and family and, have that whole kind of like social connection with the people around you when you're doing the ritual without smoking, because I know for myself, and this is probably why I like tinctures so much, like I'm not a smoker. It hurts. It irritates my lungs. I know a lot of people love to smoke cannabis flower and I don't judge them. I have no problem with that. I think that's a beautiful thing. But for those of us that really are looking for something alternative, and a fun way to consume together, the cannabis mocktail is a great way to go.
100%. Yeah. And then you're looking at the cafes, the one that opened up in West Hollywood, there's smoking lounges and things of that nature. It seems like tinctures may be the easier way to penetrate into that kind of corner of the market where you kind of have an off the shelf, probably larger bottle that they can use as bitters in their drinks and things of that
Yeah.
nature. I saw you had winter bitters, I believe, on your site.
Yes. Hmm.
And so tell us about like, is there seasonal products that you guys do? Is it a consistent line? And also like, hey, during the winter we do this, springtime we do this, based on the different patterns we see, I guess in the Northern Hemisphere at least.
Yeah, I want to do more of that. I think what's tricky now is that in order for consumers to get the product, we have to get the dispensaries to pick it up, and they don't always pick up the seasonal products.
Mhm.
And we can't sell online or anything like that. So we did do a winter bitters, and we're going to have that out again, and that's like a traditional bitters formula. So, you have like your gentian that makes it sort of like the bitter element. And then it has like different aromatics like cloves and cinnamon and cardamom. So it's kind of this warming blend. And it just goes really well with like pretty much almost any combination of like kombucha, fruit juices. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I didn't, I've used it in like a, oh God, why am I forgetting the name of the common drink that everybody drinks with whiskey?
Oh, the
Uh,
mules? The
no,
whiskey,
not mules. An old fashioned.
old fashioned.
It,
Okay, yeah,
it
yeah.
it does go great with an old fashioned, but I don't recommend that in general. But it really does, and I think that if you do have a little alcohol, that cannabis can really actually like mitigate the inflammatory effects of it. So that like if I have some with some whiskey, the next day I actually feel really good. So it's kind of unique. But yeah, so that's just kind of a classic bitters formula. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I'd like to do more seasonal products. I think that would be a really fun thing to do. So far though, it's, one thing in theory and it's another to roll these products out into two dispensaries and launch the way that you want to. It's not always that easy.
100%. You bring up a point that, hey, like the dispensaries don't want to pull on and lean on these seasonal products. They have a plethora of products, especially out in California. What has been one of the successful ways for you to get in dispensaries? Do you have big distribution? Have you used a distribution partner who already has a network? Was this something that was homegrown? Tell us about your distribution strategy.
Yeah, sure. So we were super fortunate to be one of the first partner brands with Kiva Confections. As you probably know, they're one of the original confections companies in California cannabis. They make amazing products, and they decided to do distribution and develop the portfolio of brands that they currently have. And so we jumped on with them in, I think it was 2016, and they really did wonders. It was a great access into the industry. They're, the owners, Christy and Scott, are really wonderful people, and they've built an amazing company. And so we've been fortunate enough to be part of that kind of since the beginning. And it's been huge for us. It was a great benefit. They helped us kind of like being a very small business. We bootstrapped our business. We never took on any capital. So They helped us kind of like introduce these products throughout California very slowly so that we could keep up with demand. And, we've met just a ton of really great people that in some cases have moved on to other jobs, and, some cases they've stayed with Kiva, but we've built this amazing network that all kind of started there. So we were extremely fortunate.
Gotcha. That, you bring up the thing is like, cannabis is a team sport. You can focus on your little spot in the area, but you need a lot of people to create this kind of symphony of things to happen. So
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your team. We've learned a lot about you. Tell us a little bit about who is on your team, their roles, what their specialties are. It seems like there's going to be a lot of people's hands touching this product before it makes it to the consumer. So who are the people adding value to your business nowadays?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a unique situation. We're actually a very small company that I think people kind of assume that we're a lot bigger than we are. Kind of the core of the team is my business partner and co-founder, Susan Cleverton, and myself. And between us, she has the role of COO and I'm the CEO, and we just pretty much wear every single hat. We apply for our license. We are the compliance officer. Like, we are on every single call, touching every single part of the business at all times. We also have a woman, Nicole Daryanani, that is our VP of sales, and she has a lot of experience. She was one of the territory managers in sales at Kiva. Then she went over to Kaliva, and now she's working for us. And, she is a powerhouse. So she's doing a lot of great things for us. We kind of, as a team, work directly with the Kiva sales managers, and that's really important to us. We work closely with their VP of sales, Brian Dewey, who's, super helpful in terms of providing a lot of perspective to us about, the changing trends in the market. So Kiva is a big part of our team. And then we do have sales managers in Southern California and Northern California that are watching over things at all time and kind of keeping, making sure that the bud tenders are trained up, the dispensaries have the inventory that they need, that, things are, functioning well, and the quality control is in place at all times. And that's kind of the bulk of our team. Then we have a small manufacturing team in Arcata that handles, manufacturing of the products and making sure that the quality is high and that the compliance is all in place. So yeah, that's it. That's our team right there.
Well, it's a super powerhouse team. I guess it allows you to be pretty nimble, and you have the feel, and like you said, the pulse, and your hands are on the business all the time. Are you from startup life? Is your whole life startups? And I don't want to call you small business because it seems like it's doing pretty well. What are your background in types of small businesses like this versus like being in a larger corporate type of environment with hundreds of business constituents that you have to work with?
Yeah, so I don't come from being an entrepreneur, but I think after starting this business, I always will be. I love the cannabis industry, and I tell you, I have been through a lot. So if I was going to burn out, I feel like it would have happened already.
Yeah.
I actually was a scientist. I was a biologist and botanist before this. And so on the corporate side, I did work for like a pretty large consulting company, but it was just it wasn't like doing sales or, like manufacturing a product. It was quite different. So this is entirely new to me. And that's why I love it so much, is because coming from a side of things where it felt like there was like one way that was already kind of established in an industry that was very well established, a lot of it was just following a template. And I just didn't jive with that. I found it really like dry and sterile. And so what I love about entrepreneurship is the fact that like you have to stay on your toes at all times. You're constantly pivoting, and you have to use creative solutions all the time. You can't see a problem as like a roadblock. You have to see it as an opportunity to kind of like find a way around it quickly. And so those are the things that I most love about cannabis and running a business. And so, yeah, I'm totally hooked for life on this thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, being an entrepreneur, you got a lot of pressure on you and a lot of things expected of you, but there's a lot of great things that can come from, unleashing what that raw power is inside you and really seeing what you're made of here. So
yeah,
that's good. And so Humboldt Apothecary, it's in your name. It must be important. Why Humboldt? Are you from there? What's the connection aside from the business name?
Yeah. So I've been in Humboldt County for 20 years now. So I'm not from here originally. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, but I've been here a long time and it's near and dear to my heart. I mean, it is the heart of the Emerald Triangle, and it's where, like this whole industry was largely started. And so it's a lifestyle to me. It's my culture. It's supporting the farmers that coming into full legalization in California has been like a really scary leap of faith, because these farmers that have their little small plots up in the hills are now competing against like big money in the Central Valley, and
Mhm.
massive infrastructure and stuff that like can't really even exist where we are. Like if you've ever looked at pictures of Humboldt or visited Humboldt County on the north coast of California, like it's rugged terrain. It's extremely mountainous. It's rugged. It's huge roadless swaths, so very remote and hard to access. And it's not traditionally what you would think of as like agricultural land. But also because Humboldt County is responsible for building such a huge genetic database of cannabis.
Yes.
A lot of the strains are adapted to this climate here, so it's near and dear to my heart. And when we built the company, I wanted to make a statement about supporting my community and standing behind the farmers here, because they support us all the time. We got to support them back. We got to make sure that our community continues to thrive in this huge leap of a major transition into legalization in California now. I mean, hopefully federally someday, someday soon.
Yes, hopefully
We would
soon.
all
Yeah.
love to see that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And when you brought up it's your culture and being up in NorCal, it's California can be broken down into three probably different states, but the culture up there around sustainability and environmentally friendly practices, I saw that was on your website. So is everything locally sourced, or is much sourced from Humboldt County, at least the cannabis?
All the cannabis is sourced from Humboldt County. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then, getting new ingredients, what is the process through sourcing through some of those things? You come from a science background. I'm guessing there's probably pharmaceutical grade products out there, but also dealing with the raw product and feeling and touching. And do you visit farms where your products are sourced from?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the great thing about Humboldt County is it's a pretty small community. And if you've been here for as long as I have, a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, I have access to, a huge range of different farms, different farmers that are growing amazing products. And so, yeah, I do get to go and visit them and touch the plant directly and, like witness their agricultural practices, and know that, the quality of that plant, that flower is, really good. So yeah, it's something that I love about living in this county, is that I have access to just amazing biomass at all times. And, I get to go see it like from the little seedling on up. And so that's really cool.
That's great. And it's not everybody is very fortunate to be able to see the plant and learn about the plant. You see that, most people, not most people, I don't want to say most, but a lot of people see, what's on the television. They don't get to go out to the farmers and meet the people behind the products. It's good that you're out there and you're being an advocate for them. So one of the things I want to also ask is, what is one of your favorite products that you use aside from the sleep one? Do you have any other products that you guys have that, hey, you should take a look at these products here?
Yeah, well, I'm really proud of the two topicals that we launched. We launched them, I think, toward the end of 2019. And, part of being a small company is that we don't always have the resources to be as loud as some of the other companies.
Hmm.
But our products, we tend to have kind of like a cult following, because when people try our products, they're like, oh, these are really effective. And so we have created a balm and like a wintergreen roll-on stick. And they're super all natural. They're made with a range of essential oils. They're a 1-to-1 CBD to THC, and then they have menthol in them as well. And they are amazing. They work so well. So I'm a big fan of those products. I think everyone should try them. And not only that, but they have like an amazing price point on them. I think they sell at most dispensaries in California for around $25. And I mean, like a jar of the balm will last you a really long time. And it's amazing for like achy joints or for sore muscles after a workout. I put it on my feet sometimes if I've been standing and like I want to just I'll like massage it in my feet at the end of the day, and I wake up and feel totally like rejuvenated. So I'm a big fan of our topicals. I recommend everybody try them. And they're a great entry point for new users too, because if people are like, wanting to get to know this plant and kind of figure out how it works, but they're a little timid about taking it internally and feeling the effects, I always tell people start with a topical because it'll blow your mind. And it's a good way to sort of like get the feeling of how this plant can be a benefit to you without having any sense of psychoactivity internally.
That's a great piece of advice. Yeah, well, you've got a lot, significant amount of consumers jumping into the industry now, and it's very easy to think, oh, I've got to smoke a joint or eat a gummy. This little cream's not going to do anything for me. There are many other things that happen to you other than the psychoactive ingredient. I guess the mindset of things that happen inside your body here. So yeah, using the topicals is a great way to, again, introduce yourself to the product and get associated with the brand and learn about the brand. So that's a beautiful way to put that. I want to switch gears a little bit here now and kind of talk about the challenges of the industry. Entrepreneurship and cannabis industry specifically is not sunshine and rainbows every day. So
No,
I
it
want
is
to,
not.
no, it is not. And I want to, ask you, what is one of the challenges that you may have, been thinking before you got into the industry that really wasn't that big of a deal, or something that, hey, you didn't even know this was going to be a problem until you got into the industry? What are some of the challenges you faced, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Okay, yeah. So I would say a really big challenge was we basically went through the transition with our products on the shelves already from Prop 215 medical use into fully compliant adult use cannabis in California, like completely regulated. So that transition for like the OGs in the industry that weathered that series of storms was extremely challenging because we were operating as a business, so we had our standard operating procedures, and we did things a certain way, and then over time we had to change that and pivot very quickly as the regulations came out and were established. So I can give you an example that's specific to my company. We make these alcohol-based tinctures. Well, the Bureau of Cannabis Control that oversees testing of all finished products that go into dispensaries in California said they defined alcohol as a solvent, right? Well, that's not because they wanted to go and crush a little women-owned business. It's just in their minds, they took a lot of notes. They observed that alcohol was a common solvent used, and that in order to speak to the quality of the finished product, probably mostly concentrates, you would then want to get off that residual solvent. So we started getting calls from the lab, and they're like, what are you guys going to do? Like, come January 1st, your products can't pass compliance testing because the base is alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to contact Department of Public Health, who oversees manufacturing. We said, hey guys, we've got a problem on our hands. What can you do for us? And they said, don't worry about it. Alcohol is an ingredient. It's not a solvent. Well, that's not how it worked. I mean, there was no way around that written into the regulations. And it was just oversight because we're a really small niche company. So we were actually able to make our case. There were a number of hearings that the Bureau of Cannabis Control put on for the public so that they could get a gauge of, where the loopholes were, what the problems were with their regulations. And they listened to us. And, we wrote some letters and we talked to some of the officials that were high up in the agency. And they changed that regulation for us specifically, I think. And so we did have to pull all of our products off the shelves temporarily. And that was back in 2018. And we had to, work very hard and kick and scream and make ourselves heard in the state, but we were able to do so. Now, in the process, we had to buy back all of those products from dispensaries, and we had to destroy them all. And it was painfully expensive for a very small business. So I'm not going to lie, it was painful, but we were able to just operate on a lean budget. And Kiva's always been really incredible about supporting us and helping us pay off debts slowly if we need to. They've been very understanding with working with a small business. So we were able to recover from that and get back on our feet. Now, this has just been, that transition, I guess, was sort of boot camp for all of us that started in, Prop 215 and went into adult use. because since then it's just been one thing after another. I mean, we thought that we were like fully in the clear, and then it's
Yeah.
like between the fires that are sweeping through the state every, August through October now, and now operating in the midst of a pandemic, our industry was like, came close to being potentially shut down at the beginning. And then, Gavin Newsom did declare cannabis an essential good, which, that really kind of like saved us all.
100%.
And so it's just like one thing after another. At this point, I feel so conditioned that I've realized that, I, as a business owner, especially in cannabis, like cannot get too comfortable. Anytime I think, oh yeah, I got it going on, like I know what I'm doing in this industry, I am totally in danger of like, just not being on my A game. So I try to stay extremely humble and extremely aware, and just really understand like what is going on the ground at all times, and how can I, constantly be like pushing to do better as a business owner and as a company to adapt to these constant changes.
That's amazing. You've got to stay on the pulse. It's like built on a very shaky foundation. Every always changing, something new coming up. There's a problem here, a problem there. So you have to keep your feelers out. You've got to have a good network. I want to talk about, the politics side of things. You got involved in politics when it did impact your business. What are your thoughts about getting involved in politics when, maybe you were not going to be impacted by that alcohol thing, but you had the ability to stand up and say something about that? Should people get involved in the politics in their for cannabis in their local area? Because if in California, 2/3 of the cities prohibit the sale of commercial cannabis. So how do we, or what are your thoughts around the prospective business owners, current business owners, moving politics in a way such that we can remove these cannabis deserts and get your products into more places?
Yeah, I mean, I've been super inspired by all of the activists that, worked really hard to help shape the industry in California. I mean, it was not a win all the time for everybody. I mean, there were some big losses as well along the way, and everything's a compromise. But, I think that everybody has the opportunity to have a voice. And I don't know that the same, sort of uh, procedures are going to be implemented in other states to kind of help inform the regulations. But I think California did a really good job with, establishing the regulatory entities, and having a lot of, public hearing opportunity to, make sure that they were, getting the voices and the perspectives of all of the stakeholders, basically, that were willing to come out and be heard. And whether that's, writing letters, whether that's, writing out a public comment if you don't want to show up or can't show up, or, just showing up and speaking about what is important to you. I think it's an opportunity on a really grassroots level to, impact and inform an industry that is just so young, and we need everybody's input. So it's a great opportunity to get involved, and I, encourage everybody to do so.
Beautiful, beautiful. So kind of winding down here, any advice for either newbies getting into the industry, or, we talked about your transition from medical to rec. There's many states that are going through that transition. Is there any other advice or things that you wish someone would have told you either before you got into the industry, or when you're in stage one, going to stage two? What are some things that maybe you see general advice, don't do this or that? What are some things that, the insiders don't tell people often enough that would have saved you some headache?
That's a really good question. And I don't know that I have an outstanding answer to that. I mean, I definitely think for anybody looking to jump in, do your research, read the regulations up and down and left and right. Find a way to be connected with the cannabis community locally, like in your local jurisdiction as well as in the state that you live in, because things change really quickly. And if you insert yourself into that community, whether there's like a local growers association, I know like many states have a really strong women grow entity. In my little community, we started like a women's cannabis group where we would all get together, a lot of entrepreneurial types that were interested in building businesses. And, we would read the regulations, and we invited like our local county sheriff to come to one of our meetings and talk to us about like things on the ground and how things were developing. And I really found power and, inspiration in that, because, if you make an error and you don't understand the regulations and you build a product, you could find yourself, it's expensive. I mean, that's kind of everybody's biggest complaint, is that it can be very cost prohibitive to build a cannabis business. You need a good lawyer. That is absolutely essential, at least one. And, you need to be very mindful about how you build the structure of your business and your products from the ground up. And so I think really, understanding the regulatory process in your own state and your own jurisdiction is super, super important. And that's a good place to start.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this is a lot of little nuances that can hang you up and make the process a lot more painful. So that's great advice to the newbies out there, getting involved in their community, starting a community or an activist group before even starting a business, so you can kind of get the lay of the land. Because cannabis, it's a local business, for the most part. People are not driving 200 miles to get a product unless they're in one of those cannabis deserts. So yeah, getting in with your local community, that's fantastic advice. Is there anything last thing you'd like to share with our audience, or things you'd like people to know about your business or you or your team?
Well, as far as our business goes, you can check us out at humboldt-apothecary.com. We do have an Instagram page and Facebook as well under Humboldt Apothecary. And if you go to our Learn section on our website, we have a whole lot of really great articles that speak to all of the many wonderful benefits of cannabis, and why, from a scientific perspective, it can be really helpful for building vibrant health in your body. So we really seek to inspire wellness, and for people to kind of like take that wellness journey into their own hands. And so, we like to provide a ton of resources about that. So please do check us out online and check us out on social media. And you can email us with any of your questions. We are happy to answer any questions from curious people.
Amazing. So yes, check everything out online. We'll have all the links and below this video or on the screen here. So Gillian, thank you very much for your time, sharing about your business, your story, your journey. It's been an honor chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. It was a real honor to chat with you as well. Really appreciate the opportunity.